I'm sick and I'm bored, and this is my 2017 Cannondale Slate. Now, being one who can never leave well enough alone, let's make some modifications to it. Today, I'm going to attempt to make this bike internally cable routed. Before I get any further, just a couple of caveats. One, this is not going to be a very refined video. I'm filming it on my phone. I'm sick. I'm inside the house. I'm not putting in effort to make it great, but I do want to document if this works. Two, I am not doing this for any kind of benefit whatsoever, other than I like the way an internally routed bike looks, and I want to try to make mine look the same way. Yes, there will be a hose sticking out here. Yes, it will come out of here, but I think once it's together, it'll look pretty good. Look right here, you'll see you've got the front brake cable going down to the caliper, and we've got the rear brake cable going into the frame here. From here, it routes internally where it has to go. Up top, you can see here I've unwrapped this. The brake cable routes externally to the handlebar. It comes out front like a typical, externally routed bottom or frame set. But right here, there is an opening that my DI2 cable that runs from left to right routes through. So because this cable routes all the way across, I know that this handlebar is open all the way across. And I also know on the back side of the handlebar, there's an opening that goes into a stem. Those of you who aren't familiar with the OG lefty stem setup, there's two different ways this is done. One is there is a single tube that gets pressed in from the bottom and goes up, and then the stem clamps down on top traditionally like a normal stem, and the bearings are press fit on both the frame and the stem, and with the upper and lower crowns holding everything together. That's what keeps the fork, you call it a fork, but that's what keeps it from rattling around, keeps it good and tight in here. There's a really tight fit between the crowns and the bearings. Now this, like I said, is an OPI or one-piece integration stem. And the way this works is it actually comes in two pieces. There's the lower piece and the stem, which forms the upper piece. Now the upper piece gets pressed down, and it is pressed into the top headset bearing. And then this comes in from the bottom, and you see it's got threads on it. And this actually threads into the bottom of the stem that's pressed into the top bearing, and it pulls it all together. I'll show you that more in detail once I take this apart further, but just to elaborate thus far, we have a hole that starts right here with an opening that runs all the way down the handlebar, an opening that runs into the stem, a stem that is completely hollow and runs down and is completely hollow down through here, and then it's completely hollow through here. So the only thing keeping a hose from going from here to inside this tube is the fact that this tube does not have an entry between the two. Well, now it does. So my plan is to do just that. Get the brake hose to run inside the down tube, in through this hole, up into this tube, up into the stem, and into the handlebar. Now the front is going to be a little different because you can see this is a suspension stem, so there's no way to run the hose all the way down to the caliper completely internally. But my plan is to likewise run the front brake hose inside the stem, or inside the handlebar, inside the temp, and just down through the center of this tube, coming out at the bottom, so that when all is said and done, this brake hose right here will come out underneath here, and the only section will be open from here to here. Now here we are looking up into the head tube like I was discussing before, and you can see all the way at the top there that is the top of the inside of the stem. You see the upper bearings, you see the lower headset bearing, and you see the opening that is going into the down tube. So that's where the cables are going to route through. Get this thing torn apart a little bit more, and I'll come back and give you a better view of everything and how it's going to work. With the handlebar off, you can see the hole I'm talking about at the back of the handlebar. And then you can sneak in here, and let me turn on the flash. You can see how the stem is open, and that back is where it turns down into the hollowness of the head tube. Now, there are some burrs in here, which I'm probably going to hit with a rasp before I route cables, just to avoid any damage to the cable through chafing, but that's where we sit right now. And before I take this apart, I figured I'd show you this. You can see up inside that tube, that hole that's going into from the head tube to the down tube. I'll give you a better shot of that later and the clearances I have, but that's how it's going to be right there. Alright, it's been several hours since I last filmed, so I don't even remember what I promised you guys would and wouldn't come. But here's where we are. I've got the handlebars with the hose wrapped in on both sides. And it is going through the bars and coming out the bottom here. Next, I'm going to get the fork installed back on, and then I'll show you this guy going in. I tried to film it, but I couldn't do it one-handed. But fork is on, stem is on. It's going to get tapped down into the bearing so everything sits nice and flush. And then we'll put the bottom piece on. I'll show you that when it goes in. So the two brake cables and the DI2 line are fed through. This is just going to go up in there and get threaded in. Now I can appreciate some concerns some of y'all might have. I kind of had the same ones with cutting this hole, mess with the structural integrity of this thing. Well, there's two things, reason why I don't think it will. One, the tightening stretch that happens when it gets tightened up. The bottom of the stem sits against here, and the spacer sits against here. So the stretching forces as you tighten it up is applied here and not down here. Second, yeah, that's a pretty big hole, but this is a pretty beefy head tube with pressed fit bearings on the top and bottom and double crown setup, so I don't think it'll be a problem. If it turns out being a problem, I can just buy another one of these and go back to stock. That's the only modification that's been made, but you know, I just want to give it a try. There is one more problem I did not foresee happening until just now, but this is the tool I use to tighten the bottom of that stem, and as you can see, I had to route the cables through it just to get it on to hand tighten it. Now that doesn't leave me much options for getting it tighter than that. Other than I think I might just put pliers on here because this doesn't get very tight. So yeah, we'll get that tight. We'll get the rear brake cable fed through the tube into the down tube, and then we'll replumb everything. So several hours have passed since I last recorded. Genuinely, I am sick. You notice previously I had routed, started from the hoods and routing down. I originally was hoping to be able to route from the end up into the hoods, but the nature of how this is and getting everything fed through the hole and into the stem, it was just easier to go down than it was to try to force everything up, because when you're going down, like I could feed it through the bar and then feed it through the stem and attach the glue together, and I could feed from the stem down into the tube and attach the two together, where if I'd have gone up, I'd have had to go through all 3 segments in one fell swoop. So, but it's routed. I've got full mobility and the full extension of the bar, or the bars, as they rotate. So no tension, no binding, nothing like that. Everything's functioning smoothly. Because I had to go back to front, I ended up pulling the crank out, and I had to pull the whole DI2 mechanism out, and I thought I had damaged the DI2 wire, because I went to do a IPI on the DI2 before I put everything back together, just to make sure everything's good. And sure enough, no shifting, nothing. It was completely dead, wouldn't charge, nothing. Thought I was going to have to troubleshoot, figure out which cable was wrong and change it, but got to feeling around, and there was another port just chilling. I'm like, where did you come from? There's nowhere to plug in. Turns out, in the process of finagling the cables out, I had unplugged. I had unplugged the battery. So, but it's in. I've got the rear segment routed, ready to be plugged and attached. I got the front ready to be cut, plugged, and attached. I'll get the brakes connected, give you an update, and then we'll go from there. The wardrobe change here might indicate it's another day. I had to stop what I was doing, but it's all but done. I gotta put the bike back together now, but all the hoses are routed. It's bled, and boom, she's internally routed. I'll get you some better pictures once I get it back together, but it looks pretty good. I'm happy with the way it turned out. But yeah, let me get this put back together, and at some point in time for me, but a few seconds for you, you'll see it done. I just got done with the ops check ride of it. As you can see, here she is. No visible cables whatsoever. Ride went great. Let me get this boom stick off, because I did record the ride, and get the bike set up properly, and I'll show it to you. So yeah, I am really happy with the way that turned out. Operates flawlessly. No binding, no creaking, no squeaking. As a matter of fact, the bike actually handled a little bit better. When I first got on it, there was a slight difference I noticed. The steering just felt easier. And the reason for that is because originally the cables went from here, inside of here, and then into the down tube. Now, to get the cable long enough to where it could reach from here to here and still have enough length to make its full turn, this cable would actually push on the stanchion here, and that would kind of ever so slightly cause it to want to drift to the left, which I would notice when I'm riding no-handed. So now that there's no cables preventing anything from or causing that, it's handles even better. A couple things I want to mention just for the shit of it, because whatever. Down here on the lower steer tube, I mentioned that this threaded in, and I mentioned that it threads into this, and I showed you where the hole was, but I didn't go into much detail into why that hole is where it is. See, because this threads in, obviously, as it's moving up, that hole that I drilled is going round and round and round and round as it threads in. So to get that hole positioned originally, you may have saw the white lines that I had at the beginning of the video. I just put it all together, and then, you know, just kind of found where the center, the rear center of that tube is going to be. So I made sure the clocking of the tube is correct. And that's why I had to go from back to front instead of front to back, because if I was to route the cables down and then try to assemble this, then, you know, that tube is going to be spinning, and the cables inside are just going to be going round and round and round. They're going to be wrapped around the tube instead of going straight in. So that's why I had to do it that way. Every other year or so, I typically end up going through and like completely revamping and the visuals of this bike. It was originally green. This year I made it brown. Next time I do it, I'm actually thinking about maybe a blue, kind of similar to this, but a little more sparkle in it. So some of the work I did on this is a bit of a bodge. It isn't perfect, it isn't great, it isn't, you know, pristine and immaculate and like top tier quality, but it was good enough to work, because I do have intentions of next year, January time frame, stripping the bike down, having it repainted, addressing some small issues with other modifications I've done, just to get it put back together perfect again as a different color. But yeah, I appreciate you guys watching. Yeah, take it easy. If you want to see more stuff like this or more modifications I've done to the bike, let me know.